Other members of the committee, I appreciate this opportunity to share some of the struggles that are facing vulnerable American communities who are still struggling to recover from disasters. My name is Reese, and I'm the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for SBP. For the last 8 years, I've had the privilege of helping to build and lead an organization that's focused on the cessation of unnecessary human suffering wherever disasters occur. My organization is a nonprofit disaster preparedness and recovery group with the mission of reducing the time between disaster and recovery. We achieve that mission in a variety of ways. We prepare communities ahead of disasters. We build homes for survivors who are unable to afford market rate contractors. We share our best practices and resources with other organizations who serve the same. We advise state and local community leaders on the most efficient and effective practices in long-term recovery. And we advocate for federal policy changes that can positively impact recoveries around the country. Underlying all this work is a deep desire to prevent needless human suffering and fortify survivors against their breaking point. This notion is central to our work. We all have a breaking point. It's different for every individual, and after disasters, a survivor's breaking point is driven by 3 critical factors. First is time. Simply, how long does it take for a survivor to make a full recovery? Second is predictability. Do survivors have a clear path forward, or are they staring into an abyss of uncertainty? Third is access to resources. Can survivors access the resources they need, public or private, to make a full recovery and to survive while doing so? Beyond the breaking point, individuals lose their ability to focus on work, care for their families, be present for their lives. Families simply lose hope. Over the last 8 years in communities across the country, I've personally seen this hopelessness manifest as domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse. I've seen hardworking Americans who achieve the dream of home ownership lose it all because they were unable to suffer the delay and unpredictability that is seemingly built into America's system for disaster recovery. Impacted Americans on SBP's waiting list have died in wait for federal assistance that simply didn't make it in time. At this point, I've spent as much time working on U.S. disaster recovery as I spent as a United States Marine. I'm not certain of many things, but one is this. The successful reform of our nation's framework for disaster recovery is more important to America and to Americans than anything I did on either of my tours in Iraq. The written testimony I've submitted shares much more about our organization and the human stories that animate our work each day. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. However, in my remaining time, I'd like to make 3 specific recommendations about how we can improve disaster recovery in America. First, as Mr. Sprayberry mentioned, we can create a single application for federal assistance. Presently, disaster survivors must fill out a FEMA application where they're sometimes denied and referred to SBA for a loan that they may or may not be eligible for. Few understand that one must apply for the loan and be rejected in order to receive additional assistance from FEMA. Many families are dejected after denials and simply give up, potentially affecting their eligibility for HUD assistance that will arrive years later. Solution is to create a single application for federal assistance such that homeowners apply once and can be qualified for all forms of assistance. Second, FEMA must improve its damage assessment methods. Presently, FEMA's primary means of assessing damage to homes is to send individual inspectors to houses one at a time with paper and pen or tablet devices to adjust damages. This method is slow, inconsistent, often inaccurate, and it's subject to human error and human bias. Meanwhile, the insurance industry and other private actors use drones, satellite imagery, traditional flyovers, and predictive analytics to adjust and pay claims far more quickly. In Florida, after Hurricane Michael, SBP conducted analysis using FEMA individual assistance data and aerial imagery obtained from a third-party source to compare individual awards to the level of actual home damages that we could see in the images. Local officials in one community convinced FEMA to reassess 7 homes. 5 of those received additional assistance of more than $3,000 on appeal, and 1 increased from $1,100 to $34,000. Of the 2,400 properties we reviewed, we believe that another 200 Floridians are in a similar position. Imagine the impact of this technology at scale in disaster-impacted areas across the country. And finally, though I will run over my time, we must form public and private partnerships to accelerate recovery efforts. As it stands, though I tend to agree with Representative Graves, HUD CDBG-DR assistance is the greatest potential source of funds for low and moderate income families who need to make a full long-term recovery. But these funds are neither prompt nor predictable. Congress appropriates, then HUD publishes a federal register outlining the rules for use. State and local governments write action plans and submit to HUD for review and eventual approval. Only then are disbursements made to state and local governments, who begin a procurement and contracting process to hire contract teams who take still more time to ramp up and achieve scale. The end result is that programs often take 6 years or more to reach the majority of applicants, leaving aside those eligible applicants who fall through the cracks or those who simply walk away from the program because they can't deal with any more delay or despair. I'd ask this committee to think of your constituents. Families who are current on their mortgage, they pay their taxes, they didn't live in a flood zone and so weren't required to have flood insurance, now need to fund by themselves a $35,000 or more home repair and suffer a 6-year delay being reimbursed by the federal government. These are the families that SBP helps every day. They're eligible for assistance and they desperately need it. They simply cannot wait. I believe that we can build something like the Recovery Acceleration Fund, a public-private partnership where charitable funds and social impact capital can be used to rebuild homes for qualified applicants quickly and for less cost after disasters. Those funds can be reimbursed later when HUD funds eventually make it to communities. If you pair this with opportunity zones, the possibilities are truly endless. These are a few of the ideas that we believe could create more resources and make recovery faster and more predictable, ensuring that fewer Americans are pushed beyond their breaking point. These improvements could bring recovery outcomes in line with American values and prevent significant human suffering in the process. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share some of these ideas with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May, and thanks to all of you for your testimony this morning. I look forward to hearing your answers to the questions from the members. And we're now going to move on to the member questions. Each member will be recognized for 5 minutes.